So I have a um I have a membership with this sort of wine club thing that is supposed to send me a certain I build up credits and then they send me wine. So I had ordered the wine for this class. And instead of sending me the wine that was supposed to send me, UPS has stolen my wine, basically, is what happened. So I went to try to pick up the wine today after calling them to say, is it here at the pickup center? And they said, yes, it is here, but it is not there. So UPS does not have my wine and they do not know where it is. And they suspect that it is sitting on a truck somewhere, which means that even if I got it, it's cooked.
Uh,
Um, and it will not be good. So the reason it was supposed to be sitting in the warehouse is so that it would not cook. Anyway, so I have a few different things than I planned to have, but they're fairly close. So what did you all end up having for tonight?
Well, we we have a Beauregard Sauvignon Blanc,
Okay.
2019 Sauvignon Blanc. We got a Albarino, right?
Mhm. Yep.
A Vino Verde, and then the fourth one is more of a wild card. I have a cheap California Pinot Grigio.
Okay. Fred, what'd you get? What are your two wines?
hmm. Well, I have a 2019 Arroyo Seco Monterey White Riesling.
Okay.
And then this one I didn't really know about. It's a Landscroon. It's like cheaper. But it's a Chenin Blanc.
Okay. So those will be totally different than anything that we're gonna start that we're doing, but it's fine. You should start with the Chenin Blanc and then
Okay,
do the Riesling.
okay, cool.
Because the Riesling is sweet, and so you should always taste dry to sweet. Because if you taste sweet first, everything else will taste more sour and less fruity and less full flavored. So, all right. So have some red drinkers in the house, and hopefully we will begin your conversion to white wines, which I used to pretty much exclusively drink big, full-bodied red wine, and I think that that is a phase that almost everyone who gets into wine has, and then, at some point, well, some people don't ever get out of that, and some of us do, so, uh, trying to make it show me in the video and not Fred, but it's not working. So Fred will be forefront on my video that we will watch. It'll be fine. All right, so we're going to talk first a little bit about how to taste wine. So when you get a glass of wine, you are you're looking for the whole experience, not just like I'm going to put this in my mouth and see and see whether I like it. So a lot of things about wine tell us things about it. And so I'm just going to pick up my first glass of wine and sort of walk through this with you as we go, and you can look at your wine too. So the first thing you do is you look at your wine, and we're assessing for color. So white wine is on a spectrum of yellow. Sometimes it can be sort of a green yellow, has hints of green in it. Sometimes it has sort of hints of amber or brown in it. So as you pick up your first wine, what do you notice about the color of your wine? How would you describe it?
Mine is definitely on the more so yellow side.
Hmm.
Tinge of
Oh, good. Hmm. Ours is more pale.
Kind of a solid, I think it errs on the side of green, but I wouldn't call it like
Against the white plate, it's interesting. It's like I have like a little reference page here. I feel like we're on the straw end.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, straw is a common sort of color marking for wine. So mine is I'm drinking, by the way, it's a mostly Sauvignon Blanc with some Semillon in it. This is not what I intended to have. This was something that I had in my house that was the closest thing. So this is a Bordeaux style Sauvignon Blanc. So we'll talk a little bit more about styles of Sauvignon Blanc in a minute. But so yeah, mine's extremely pale, maybe faintly green. And what the color tells you is sometimes just the variety of grape. Sauvignon Blanc does tend to be a little bit green, but it also tells you about the freshness of the wine. So wines that start to go a little white wine as it ages, it goes darker. So if you look at a white wine and it's starting to turn amber or even brown, then it's getting older, which for some white wines is good. They're meant to age, and other white wines, that is bad. You should not buy them. So if you see a brown Pinot Grigio, you should not buy that. That is not a sign of quality. Or a brown Vino Verde, like those are not meant to age. So don't buy those. But like a really good quality Chardonnay or a really good quality Riesling that is amber or brown because it's older is totally fine and probably really great. So then you're going to also like tip your glass and sort of swirl it around and see if you see any sort of viscosity on the sides of the glass, what's called legs. Like when it drains down, does it seem sort of thin or does it seem sort of thicker in texture?
There's a little thicker.
Yeah,
But-
It stays on our glass pretty.
I don't see the legs, but it seems to linger on the glass
Mhm.
uniformly.
Mine doesn't have any legs.
Okay, no legs for you. All right. So now we're going to give the wine a good swirl and you're going to smell the wine. And the way we're going to start is you're going to start with the glass sort of out from your chin a few inches and see if you can smell anything from a little bit of a distance. And then, swirl around a little more again. And then put it up to your chin and see if you can start to smell things. And at what point do you start to smell things? And then if that doesn't work, then you stick your nose right in it. So at what point did you start to smell things in your glass?
Chin level here,
Mhm.
the very close chin.
Same.
Yeah, I think I could smell it a little further out, but yeah, mostly when it got close.
I started getting a little out pretty far, but really started getting it at chin. And what kinds of aromas are you smelling?
As we're smelling, should we stay with the chin? Like if that's where we first begin?
Well, now you can stick your nose in there and really get a sense of what's going on. What you're looking for when you hold it out is the intensity of the aroma. So you're trying to assess how strong is that aroma? Because if it's really strong, I was at a class last weekend that I had a red wine that I could smell it across the table. Like it was just wafting across the table at me. I was like, that is intense.
It's fruity.
Yeah. What's funny?
Yeah.
My first reaction to this was it smells like nail polish, and then I
Oh.
did it again, and then I actually noticed maybe more floral, but I couldn't tell you what level of flower. Just maybe some coconut. I don't know.
I think I was snacking on an apricot, like dried apricots earlier, and that's what this smell reminds me of. But not apricot exactly, just more of that like sweet dried fruit kind of smell.
Okay.
Yeah, this one smells mostly fruity to me.
Mhm. Can you identify, any of you, what kind of fruit you're smelling? Like, let me give you some broad categories because I think this sometimes helps you start thinking in a direction like, is it citrus? And these are like yes, no questions. Like, is the fruit that you smell citrus?
I think
Mm.
no, but close on ours.
No.
Is it stone fruit? Like, does it smell like peaches or apricots or plums or?
That would be mine.
Okay.
What it smells like.
That does not surprise me at all with Chenin Blanc. Or is it green fruit like green apple or like, well, gooseberry is not a common smell for most Americans. It's something I've had to go smell in learning about wine. I had to go buy gooseberries and be like,
I think green apple. I hadn't thought of that, but I think green apple.
green apple or pear. Sometimes you get pear. This one that I'm drinking is like really, really green apple-y and a little bit of pear, and then like a little bit of stone fruit after that. Or you might have tropical fruit. Sometimes white wines have pineapple or banana or mango.
That's what I'm smelling.
Yeah.
More tropical.
Okay. Yeah. And then sometimes you have flavors that are, or aromas that are not fruit, things like herbaceous aromas like grass or herbs or, you know, some asparagus or something like that. Or you have stony kinds of, in case you don't go around smelling stone, like slate or graphite or chalk. Those are all kinds of flavors and aromas that go with wine. Yeah. And floral, you know, those kinds of things, floral aromatics. I am terrible, I will just tell you, at identifying different floral aromatics because I'm allergic to all of them and I don't smell flowers. Like purposely do not go around smelling flowers because it makes me not breathe. So I don't know what any of them are. Like, I'm getting better. Like this is kind of honeysuckle-y.
What causes what causes the wines to be like grassy? Because I've had ones before and those are my favorite white wines, the ones that what is in like the process of making those that makes them that way?
Yeah, that is actually a chemical compound in the grapes themselves that is just brought out by the fermentation process. So that grassiness is it's a kind of what's called a pyrazine. And the pyrazines also give like a green, like in their strongest form, give a green peppery kind of flavor, but also can do sort of grass and asparagus and things like that. But it's all chemical compounds in the grapes. And those things are what are called primary flavors and aromas because they come directly from the grapes and they don't have to do with the winemaking. And then there are other flavors and aromas that come from the winemaking process that come from fermenting on oak or aging in oak or fermenting with like extra time spent on the yeast cells, which are called the lees. And those kinds of flavors are secondary. And then you get tertiary flavors, which is what happens with age.
Oh.
Yeah. But all of those like grassy flavors, that's straight from the grape.
Nice.
All right, so now we're gonna actually taste the wine. We've been sitting here talking about wine, not tasting it. So I recommend that you sort of take enough to like coat your mouth in it, sort of swish it around in your mouth before you swallow or spit, whatever you're choosing to do. I'm drinking my wine tonight. At work, I was tasting wine, so I was spitting. Today, I'm drinking the wine. Right. So some of the things that we are paying attention to when we taste wine, the first thing is sweetness. Is it completely dry, bone dry? Is it slightly off dry? Is it sweet? Somewhere in between? Like, where on the scale is your wine hitting?
This
How many
seems
sips are we allowed to take?
What?
How many sips can we take?
You can keep drinking it. It's fine. You can take as many as it requires you. I assume you have the rest of the bottle there if you need to pour yourself more. So
True.
Do you have any advice? Like, I get tripped up with sweet. Like, I want to say that it's sweet, but I also think it's really sour and tart. And I have a hard time like figuring out how can it be both.
yeah, so sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes what's tricky is it sweet or is it fruity? Because
Okay.
there's a lot of wine that is fruity that has no residual sugar to it at all. And most Sauvignon Blanc falls into that category where it's not actually sweet. But it can taste that way because the fruit flavors are so evident. How you test acidity, which is the kind of next thing that you would be tasting, is okay. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to sort of demonstrate. So you put the wine in your mouth and you leave it there, and then for a little bit, and then you swallow, but you keep your mouth shut and you hang your head forward, and you see how much saliva collects, and how long your mouth waters. And if you like real wine geeks, if they're wine tasting, sometimes will like not shut their mouths. They'll just like sit there and spit on the floor, like because you're trying to see like how much saliva is produced, because that's the measure of acidity, is how much it makes your mouth water. So we're gonna do this charming thing now and test our acidity. Are you still watering?
Yeah. Wow.
I am still watering.
Wow.
Yeah, and you get it like on the sides of your tongue. Yeah.
Mhm.
And even wine that's very sweet can still be very acidic, but that'll be what you'll notice in a wine that actually has residual sugar is you'll do the acid test and you'll like keep watering and you'll be like, but why? It doesn't taste tart. like this does not taste sour, and yet my mouth keeps watering.
Wow.
Like sweet Rieslings, you'll be like, oh, like this has no acidity, it's just sweet. And then you'll realize doing the acidity test, you're like, no, this has like spiking acidity. But that's why it tastes good, because it has like balance to it. If you're assessing red wine, you would think about tannin, like how drying the wine is in your mouth, but we're not doing red wine, so we don't care about that. Some white wines have a little bit of tannin to them because they've been fermented with skin contact, but that's none of the wines that I am tasting or that you are tasting tonight have skin contact to my knowledge. So, well, that's not true. My stand-in for the Albarino has skin contact, but I'll just leave you out of that problem. We might talk about what skin contact is, though. All right, the next thing is like alcohol. So like how much does it burn going down? How much do you feel like kind of a heat from the wine that you drink? White wine is usually pretty mild in alcohol, usually pretty moderate. I'm not really getting much burn off of this. I would guess that this is at about a 12.5% alcohol.
Nice.
Eh,
Okay.
it's a little higher, it's 13, but yeah.
Are there certain percentages like 12.5, 13, 13.5, 14 kind of incremental like that?
Yeah, I mean, mostly goes up by 0.5%, and white wines tend to fall. Sweeter ones will fall between like 7 and 10. Dry white wines will fall between like 11 and 13, 13 and a half. Red wines will tend to fall more like between 13 to 16%.
Wow, okay. Oh, nice. Here we go.
Yeah.
We have a really
There's your
great
key.
book for references. What was this
Great.
wine? Folly?
I just got the wine
Oh, yeah, I
folly.
love that book. Yeah,
And
super
the-
helpful.
Yeah, the graphics are just so great. So easy to read.
So what kind of flavors are you picking up in this wine of yours?
In mine.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just not a really great wine. um, there's not a lot of character. I think my other one is going to be a lot better. Yeah, I can definitely tell it's it's definitely dry.
Mhm.
It is, yeah. I mean, I don't. Let me just here. I'll just down the rest of this, and I'll let you know. Yeah, it's like dry, but it's almost tart as well. Um, on the acidity test I did, there was a lot of saliva there. So yeah.
Mhm. Did it kind of match up with what you smelled, or did you taste something different from what you smelled?
Match pretty close.
I don't know like I don't like it, I don't think. Like the aftertaste is so bitter to me. I
Hmm.
don't know. It's hard to even like get a flavor out of it. Like the smell is the best part of it.
Yeah. Is that a French Sauvignon Blanc that you have?
Californian.
California. Okay.
I don't think that the smell and the taste are the same. I do like it. The taste, I really feel like it's more of like a tropical. We in this wine folly we saw like passion fruit could
Mhm.
be one that I maybe am, but I don't think that was more of the smell and not necessarily the taste. The taste, I couldn't describe the taste. I don't know. I feel like more at this point more able to describe how it smells.
Typically, like Sauvignon Blanc, like you said, the passion fruit is one of the flavors that comes up a lot. Gooseberry, although like I said, like that's not identifiable to most American palates, but like melon comes up a lot. Um, Sometimes peach and other stone fruit, but it really varies based on where it comes from. So New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is really distinguishable because it is really grapefruity, usually. Like it is like a big grapefruit bomb with some grass, and then also this charming aroma that is known as cat pee. And it really does, like once you taste that and you know that that's what that tastes like, you can't like untaste it. uh and people really like it. It's like one of the components of Sauvignon Blanc that some people really love. And then like you get into wine and you're like, oh, cat pee, and then you cannot like unsmell the cat pee. But it's just a chemical compound that's in specifically New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and sometimes to a lesser extent from other places, but very strongly there. Um, if you get Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley in France, it tends to be much more mineral. You get lots of like so stony kinds of flavor to it, and which seems odd because you don't go around like licking stone, but that's kind of what it tastes more like, stone and chalk.
Have you actually licked your stone and chalk? Like, is that a flavor?
Yes, and they don't really have taste. It's like the taste that you imagine.
Hmm.
Like rocks don't actually taste like anything.
So it's your brain that tells you what flavor rocks taste?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing. And then you have like Sauvignon Blanc from Bordeaux, which isn't that far from the Loire Valley, but it's a totally different climate and it tends to be fuller bodied, tends to be more tropical in flavor. They often blend it with Semillon, which gives it a little more body. It's a little weightier. And that's what I'm drinking, is this sort of Bordeaux style blend, but from Sonoma. And yeah, it's quite a bit heavier than most Sauvignon Blanc, and very like tropical fruit, stone fruit flavor, not very much citrus at all. So yeah.
Could you categorize what like a mineral flavor would be like?
That's what I'm trying to explain, what minerality tastes like. Without doing the like, it's like if you imagine that you licked some rocks. That,
Fair enough.
because that's the only thing I can come up with, even though I have experimented with this and licked rocks and they don't taste like anything.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, it tastes like slate, or or like wet, like if it rains on rocks, like what that smells like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or sometimes people describe things as medicinal, and I was at a tasting group and I had to describe like what medicinal is. Like if you
Robitussin.
accidentally bite down on a pill that you're really supposed to just swallow, and you have like that little bit of a funk in your mouth that you're not supposed to have, like that is medicinal.
Does that show up in white wine? Is that like a,
It does sometimes, yeah. Yep.
do you feel like it's medicinal to you? Like you say bitter.
Maybe that's a good question. It's more at the end though. Like when I first sip it, I'm getting more of like what I smell. But then once I swallow, it like turns
Yeah,
bitter. Yeah.
fair enough. All right, we're gonna move on to some Albarino, or some of you are.
Oh yeah.
This was one of the wines that UPS has stolen from me. So I instead am drinking a different Spanish white. This is from Isius. It's a winery that I was in Rioja, and it's a Rioja Blanco, which is made with a grape called Viura. It's like totally obscure outside of Rioja. Everyone has wandered away.
Except for me.
Yes, not everyone, but
my favorite Sauvignon Blanc is, or the one that I've learned to appreciate white wines is Matua. It is from New Zealand. So now I'm excited to go try the New Zealand wine and see if I get some grapefruit notes.
yeah, definitely. Oh, and Matua is super grapefruity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoy some solid grapefruit, so maybe that's why I like it.
Matua is a big grapefruit bomb. But in a good way. I like Matua. It's a good time.
Yeah, I like Matua. Somebody at Whole Foods recommended it to go with a salmon dinner.
Yeah, that works. Speaking of pairings, like Sauvignon Blanc in general will go with anything that's kind of herby. So like green herbaceous sauces, or like things that are, things that have a lot of herbal components go well with Sauvignon Blanc. Fresh vegetable-y dishes are really good with Sauvignon Blanc. Salmon works. I would probably drink something different with salmon because it's a little fat, salmon's a little fatty. So I would want something with a little more body than that, but it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Whole Foods experience,
Yes.
I'm good for now.
So what Albarino did you get?
It is Bodegas Martin Codex.
Martin Codex.
Rias Biac.
Spicious.
No, 2021.
Yeah, it's Rias Spicious.
Yes, that.
That's the region that most Albarino comes from. It's on the western coast of Spain. Yep.
Okay.
I am very familiar with that wine, so that's good.
Cool.
Nice, good.
Yeah, I
So-
appreciated that your list was easily found at Kroger.
I was trying to get things and allow enough flexibility so that people who live in places that are a little more isolated than me or who don't have time to go to a giant liquor store could find them. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we're going to use our tasting skills to talk through wine number 2. So what do you see? If you compare sort of color wise and intensity of color to your first wine. Mine's a little bit darker in color. The first one was very, very pale straw, and this one is like a little more goldeny.
Yeah, ours is similar, but a touch darker.
Yeah, more golden.
I mean, we're still very pale. But like very much in the yellow family instead of in the green yellow family. All right, and swirl it around, take some smells.
Just opening mine. Sorry.
Okay.
A little behind.
So I was like, I don't know what you're doing over there, but I'm just gonna keep rolling along.
Oh,
Interesting.
Oh, it's-
Not as smelly. Have to work harder to smell.
oh yeah, forgot about the distance.
Yeah. I got nothing out here. Very little here. And it's still pretty pale. Like
Wow.
the smell is not pale. That's what.
Cat pee. No, just
Yeah,
kidding.
now we need to know what cat pee smells like
Yeah.
so that we can be better at detecting it.
You want to come over to my house?
Yeah, there you go.
You should not have cat pee in your Albarino.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a Sauvignon Blanc tell. If you're ever blind tasting and you smell something that smells like cat pee, that is Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
I do not know what this smell is, but it is not anything like the last one. Not fruity.
Trying to not hyperventilate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even drinking Albarino, but I think it is similar in that I'm not getting much from it aroma wise, which I don't often from Albarino. I often don't get a lot on the nose.
I have a list right here. Tree fruit. What is a tree? Like lemon is citrus, but what's a tree fruit that's not? Maybe apples, pears. Is that a tree fruit?
So I'm pretty sure that are you looking at the Wine Folly thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that what they mean by tree fruit is like apples, pears, peaches, nectarines, that kind of like they're trying to have a more expansive category than like green fruit, stone fruit, citrus fruit. Like, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting a little bit of citrus off of mine. A little bit of stone fruit, but you probably would not get as much stone fruit off of an Albarino. The Jura is much more stone fruity.
Could melon be? I guess honeydew is on our list, but
Mhm.
that's interesting. Is it salty?
I wanted to say it reminds me a little of vinegar. A little, but I don't know.
Fred, are you drinking the Riesling now?
yes, I've moved on to the Riesling. Smells. Yeah, this one smells a lot better. I do smell like that tree fruit that you were talking about there. In the pear specifically comes through. I'm not sure if it should not, but it does.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we're gonna take a little taste.
Either of those.
No, no,
We're
it's
drinking that
fine.
one.
Yeah.
So white wine is generally not fermented with the skins on. You said this thing about skin contact earlier. Usually red wine, you ferment with the skins because you're trying to get all of the flavor and the tannins out of the skins and the color. In white wine, they usually remove the skins before they ferment it. The one that I am drinking has some skin contact to it. So it's like a white wine with tannin, which is interesting. It's got a fun, funky texture. Interesting. What are you all tasting in terms of sweetness? Where on the scale are you?
This tastes very sweet to me. I don't think it's makes sense. It's not as sweet as some Rieslings that I've had in the past, but it's kind of citrusy as well. It's very good. Actually.
I didn't smell it before, but I taste grapefruit. I feel like like the finish. It's just kind of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, more to citrusy than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I feel like it's much less sweet than Sauvignon Blanc.
Mm.
I can't tell the difference in sweetness maybe, but the fruitiness sticks around longer. I think the citrusy sticks around longer.
Mm.
It also doesn't really have any burn, same as the Sauvignon Blanc.
Right. Pretty low in alcohol. Right, to see what mine is. I'm gonna say mine is exceptionally high alcohol for a white. I was like, I can feel it much more clearly than I can usually feel whites. And indeed, it is 14.5%, which is really high for a white.
Wow.
Mine, surprisingly, mine is 13%, and it doesn't taste like that at all.
No, if it's sweeter, I would guess that it was, I would have guessed it was lower.
Yeah, me too. Looked at that.
I wonder what they did to it.
No idea.
It's not how it's supposed to be. No, they added
Definitely.
sugar, essentially rectified concentrated grape must to it so that they could.
Yes. So in Cork Dork, I was in a chapter where they talked about additives
Yeah.
that like a more mass-produced winery would add to their wines. And I was flabbergasted. It makes sense because they have to have something that's reliable and stable, that's like can be produced over without much margin for error. But I didn't expect something like egg whites as an example.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, egg whites have been used as a clarifying agent for wine for like centuries and centuries. So
No
yeah.
kidding. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's one of the most traditional ways of making wine. Yeah.
Interesting.
Where things like what I just mentioned, RCGM, which is rectified concentrated grape must, which is like you take the grapes that have already been used for another fermentation and they have sugars in them and you add them to the fermentation process to bring the residual sugar up so that you can get the alcohol. There's more sugar for the yeast to eat. And so it raises the alcohol level without taking away from the sweetness. So. Random wine facts. All right. What else are you tasting? What kind of flavors are you getting?
This is almost like lemony.
I really agree that ours is like very great.
100% great.
That's like all it is.
Okay. Yeah, Martin Codex is very grapefruity. Now that I'm thinking about, I'm like, oh yes, that is. That's people who love New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, I will often recommend Albariños, specifically that Albarino and some others that are sort of adjacent to that, that are like simple Albariños, because it connects on that grapefruit front.
Yeah.
It hits some of the same notes. You can also make Albarino of a higher quality by leaving it on the yeast cells longer and sort of stirring it with the dead yeast cells, and it adds a lot more texture and body to the wine. But then you go significantly up in price in the Albarino.
Does that
And
take more time to process? Or?
it does, yeah.
Okay.
But there's like the simple Albarinos, like the one that you're drinking, are, I mean, this is a summer whites class, right? And so sometimes you want something that's like simple. It doesn't have to have a lot of complexity to it. It's a porch pounder, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty light. I mean, I don't know that there's any thickness. Like even when we swirl, it just kind of falls off the glass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna do some Vino Verde.
I will continue with my Riesling.
That's fine.
Oh, I can hunt down some other wines in the house. We'll see if I've got anything else. Maybe I'll just crack open a beer.
I was gonna say for the Vino Verde, you could have a beer, because this is a little fizzy.
Fair enough.
So Vino Verde comes only from Portugal. It comes from the region is called Vino Verde. So this gets confusing because it means green wine, but it's actually the name of the region. And the wines are usually this color, this very pale greenish yellow, but not always. They can make Vino Verde that is rosé or that is red. The thing that makes a Vino Verde style is when you pick the grapes. So they pick the grapes very, very young, like not quite ripe. And when they ferment them, because they're not quite ripe, they give off a little bit more carbon dioxide, and it ends up being a little fizzy.
Yes, I was gonna ask because
Yeah.
bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
How fun. Okay.
So that's like the first thing that you notice when you pour it, is like it's a little, what Italians would call frizzante. It's got a little bit of spritz to it.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and started drinking mine already by accident. But yeah,
Your tasting process.
out the window.
Oh, I don't smell anything.
So what are you smelling?
It's harder to smell.
Yeah.
What kind of Vino Verde did you pick up?
It is the Broadbent.
Okay. Yep. I have, mine is a like very value, which a lot of Portuguese wine is like very value friendly, because this was like an $8 bottle of wine. Straight. And if you are in Portugal, they just like bring you carafes of it. It's ubiquitous. It just shows up on your table. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're going to taste this, because we're not getting a ton of smell off of it, what are you?
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I'm still on the smelling.
Mine is very, very lemon, very lime, a little green apple.
I smell green apple.
Like pretty tart, not sweet, but very fruity. So we were talking about like the difference between sweet and fruity earlier. Like this isn't, they're not getting sugar off of this, but it's very fruit forward.
And high acid.
to the point where I think people who generally say they don't like dry wines would probably like this anyway.
I think it's unfair to say I don't like sweet wines because that seems to be such a broad spectrum of sweet. And as we're kind of talking already, sweet versus fruity, kind of knowing the difference between those two.
Mhm.
Plus tannins in the mix, like
Yeah.
how that impacts.
Yeah.
I, for a long time, thought that I didn't like sweet wines at all, but it just turns out that I'd had pretty bad sweet wines. And I had like, American style Moscato that's just loaded with sugar. And it doesn't have any balance to it. It's just like it's just a big bottle of sugar. And I had like really terrible Riesling that didn't have any acidity to it. It was just sweet. And then sort of later in the journey started drinking good quality German Riesling, which is
Yeah.
usually very high in acidity. And that's how they can get away with being sweet. Having a lot of residual sugar is because the acidity balances out and it's really, really wonderful. And the same is true of like we were drinking sweet sherries at an event last night, and I used to think I hated like sweet port and sherry and bleh. And no, like if it's good quality, it can be really lovely. And if you're drinking it with the right things.
Now, I don't know how typical this is of the Vino Verde, but I looked up the one that we have and it's quite a bit higher in acidity than all the other ones for
Mhm.
tonight. And it's the lowest in alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Vino Verde is typically low in alcohol because because they pick it unripe, it doesn't have enough sugar in it to ferment to a high level. So the yeast runs out of sugar to ferment while it's still at a very low alcohol level. And they generally don't add, because it's Portuguese, it's not the US. So they don't add sugar to it generally to bring it up.
Yeah.
They're okay with it being lower alcohol level. And the acidity is very high, again, because the grapes are not ripe.
Mhm.
Perhaps you covered this already, but remind me what causes it to be kind of bubbly.
Yeah, the fact that the grapes are not ripe yet, when they do the fermentation, it just releases a lot more gas, releases a lot more carbon dioxide, and makes the wine fizzy.
It's kind of shocking in a way because that almost adds to your mouth experience. That it maybe impacts the flavor also somehow. Would the fizziness be considered more texture or like?
It is a texture. It definitely is a texture that I think brings out the acid in the wine. It has a little bit of an edge to it. Vino Verde is not, I think it's better with food than just on its own. And typically in Portugal, you would not just sit around and drink. In most of Europe, you don't just like sit around and drink wine and not eat anything. And in Portugal, you would be like eating salt cod fritters. You're like, it's like eating something that's like fish and kind of fatty and like a little salty. And this with that is amazing.
Yeah.
Or with like tinned fish or, things that are smoked with like smoked salmon. This is amazing.
What is this?
Because it just like cuts right through the fat.
Ooh, the Vino Verde like takes that carbon acid right out of it.
Ben says cheddar goes well with it
Mhm.
from his experience
Oh, do
this
you
last
want some?
minute.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't talked about cheese pairings, but
We're trying them all.
yeah. Yeah, it goes really well with things that have, because it is a strong flavor. So it goes well with things that have strong flavors. So if you're talking about like the Portuguese national food is this salt cod that has a very strong flavor to it. And and that's what it's in everything. And things like, anchovies and like strong salty fish is like a huge part of the Portuguese diet. And when you think about that, then like this wine makes total sense. But also like strong salty cheeses like a cheddar go really well with that.
It's interesting because I feel like this almost has a salty flavor. I,
I can see that.
yeah.
It is a little bit saline. Vino Verde is like right on the coast, and so it gets a little salinity, sometimes even from just the salt being on the grapes. So there are theories about whether like the salt is in the soil or it's like air, the blah blah. And the fact is that people do not wash their grapes before they ferment them. Like that is not a thing that happens in Europe. They throw them in because they're not spraying them down with a bunch of pesticides, so they're not trying to wash all that off. So they throw them in the fermenter and they get fermented with whatever is on them. And sometimes that is like salt spray from the ocean. So, yeah.
Is that different than the United States?
Yes. Yes. In the US, you're kind of required to wash your grapes.
Good.
Which is
an FDA standard.
it's good, I guess, but it also sort of takes away some of the terroir specificity. So it's like, okay. And also like, don't spray your grapes with pesticides in the first place. And then we wanted to do. All right, final wine. Or Fred's same wine.
I think this Riesling that I got, so kind
What?
of good with.
Yeah, that's fine. Stick with your Riesling.
Yeah.
Our last class, we had somebody who just had one glass of wine, so it was fine. Yeah. All right, so we got one more. Take a look at your wine. Oh, what did you have? You have a Pinot Grigio from California.
Yeah.
Bread and butter.
Okay, yeah. I am familiar. I have this really fun, I don't know if you can see this label. It's a Gavi. It's from Northern Italy.
Label.
The grape is Cortese in Gavi. So why they have a grape name and the place name, I don't know. That's just how it works. But Gavi is both the place and the style of wine. Yeah. And I think I've only had one Gavi before this. And so that's when I got the bottle. I was like, this is a great chance for me to try something new. Yeah. So what do we...
Okay, question.
Yeah.
Pinot Gris, is that the same as Pinot Grigio?
Yes, it's the same grape. They both mean the gray Pinot. So Pinot Gris is gray Pinot in French. Pinot Grigio is gray Pinot in Italian.
Perfect.
But they're made in different styles. So Pinot Grigio in Italy is generally pretty simple, pretty fruity, not sweet, but sometimes just a tidbit of residual sugar in it. But it's meant to be a very simple wine. It often is sort of a pear drop flavor, citrus primary, things like that. Where in France, it tends to be a lot more understated and complex and less fruity, more mineral. So if you're talking about Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio that are made in the US, then how they name it will tell you something about the style that they're trying to accomplish.
Cool. That's good to know. That's like very clever.
Yeah.
That's like a wine trick.
So if you get like Oregon Pinot Gris, they're trying to do it in the French style, which is very common in Oregon. In California, it's more common to call it Pinot Grigio and do it in an Italian style.
Yeah, this is our California bread and butter.
Yeah.
This is a much different smell than any of these, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, it kind of took me by surprise. It smells like plastic.
Oh God.
I don't know.
I don't get plastic, but I don't know what I get. I don't know what it is. It's not like. Yeah. Okay. I don't know what that is.
Like melted plastic is what it smells like to me.
Is
That
that
is-
literal?
Nope, that is a legitimate wine smell.
Is it really? Okay, wow.
You're a super taster. Super
You're
smart.
right, you're
good.
right.
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah, things like plastic, burnt plastic, rubber ball, kerosene or like petrol. Like,
Oh,
and they're not necessarily bad things, but sometimes they are. But like Riesling, like really good quality Riesling will smell like petrol, like gasoline, but it's like one of the best things about it.
wow.
Because then that blends together with everything else. And especially if it has some time to age, it's like the most amazing combination of smells and tastes.
Something that I find really fascinating and also like beautiful, for the lack of the better word, is like how the smell is always that, like, it jogs memories and stuff. Like like smelling this, I go back to my childhood in a way, like playing with plastic
Yeah.
toys or whatever. Like it's just kind of cool that there's that like level of experience that you can
Right.
have as you're drinking and like wine tasting. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, smell especially is so evocative.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. All right. So what do you taste? What's going on in your wine?
Not plastic.
That's good.
Yeah.
that's interesting. I can taste more of a burn compared to the Vino Verde, even
Mm.
though this one's just 12.5% too, but compared to the 9%,
Interesting.
I taste more.
The burn, I think, is much less than on all of these. It's like not very noticeable. But I
Mhm.
think that's maybe because I'm used to drinking like red wines. Maybe.
If you're used to drinking high test reds, then
Yeah.
none of these are going to be very high.
I like liquor. So on our little reference list, there's a category for flowers.
Mhm.
And beneath that there's dried, fresh, and oils. Could you offer insight onto the oils aspect of flowers?
Yeah, that's sort of when it smells less like the actual flower itself, either in its dried or fresh form, and more like you might expect from like an essential oil or from like something that comes to you in like in a lotion. Like it smells more like what you would get from an artificial version or an extracted version of that.
Yeah.
It's like rose lotion, or like I have this like rose body spray, and that smells very different from, it definitely is reminiscent of actual roses, but it does not smell the same.
What would you typically eat with a Pinot Grigio?
Pinot Grigio, I would probably have like a mild cheese, a fairly mild fish dish, maybe with some like fresh herbs. I might do like a light cream pasta would be good with a Pinot Grigio. Like nothing too heavy, but something that's a little bit light creamed. Pinot Grigio is good with like cacio e pepe, like which is delicious.
So good.
I'm getting ideas over here.
Yeah, planning our menu for tomorrow.
Right? Yes. It's and Pinot Grigio in its like simple, Pinot Grigio can be more complex, but most of it is very simple. The one that you're drinking is very simple. Like I know that wine, and it's sort of pretty much all primary flavor. It's just like the grape. There's not much finish to it. It's just meant for like sipping, you know, sipping around the pool, having at a picnic. It's not going to be a remarkable wine, and it can't stand up to foods that are too strong. So
Is that most Pinot Grigio, or is that more like this bread and
Like,
butter?
no, it's most like the vast majority of a California Pinot Grigio and like Italian Pinot Grigio that's under $15. Once you get over $15, you start having people who are doing more interesting things with it. They're harvesting it earlier, so it's got higher acidity. They're doing some lees stirring, so they're leaving it on the yeast cells for a little longer, so it's got a little more texture and a little sort of breadiness to it. So it gets a little more complexity. They're doing a little aging, a little skin contact, and then it can turn into something totally different. But for the most part, Pinot Grigio is supposed to be like basic and inoffensive, you know? It's the
Mhm.
wine that you buy to serve at an event when you don't know what anyone is going to drink. Like,
Yeah, approachable for most.
it's what I'm forever telling people to serve at weddings instead of Chardonnay.
Fair. Well, I just ate an almond, and I noticed that our flavor notes that are suggested is raw almond.
Hmm.
Okay, ours is roasted and salted lightly, but I kind of see like that maybe it has like maybe an almond
taste.
flavor of
Okay.
sorts. I don't know. This is not my favorite of all the four.
Yeah. Like it's okay, but it's like you said, just kind of
Unremarkable.
drink it, but doesn't do much for you.
Italian white wines, almond is often a tell for what an Italian would like. If you're trying to make a decision when you're blind tasting and you're trying to decide like, is this French, is it Italian, is it like an almond flavor is the thing that will most often steer you toward Italian whites, because they have sort of a creamy almond, sometimes toasted, sometimes raw.
Interesting. So maybe that could make sense because ours is a Grigio.
Yeah.
From California.
Raw almond.
Yeah.
All right. So do you have, so this is probably your least favorite. Did you have a favorite from what you tasted?
I feel like I need to go back through them now.
Yeah.
I have good news for you.
We have plenty.
We have
so
so much.
The bottles.
Interesting. I feel like there's nothing that really stands out, except for I'm really fascinated by the bubbly
Mhm.
texture of the Vino Verde. I like the lightness of the Albarino. And for just like casual drinking, I like the Sauvignon Blanc that we tried. This is my least favorite.
I think I'm most interested in how the taste changes depending on what you're eating. Like even right now, as I've been doing like a saltine and then like bread with olive oil or cheese, like it really does make a big difference.
Mhm.
And like the Vino Verde got better as I drank it. So I'm curious, like how many are like that, where I think I don't like it, but then as I drink it, it gets better.
Yeah. In general, wine is meant to be consumed with food.
Yeah.
So it is slightly different than some alcoholic beverages that are just sort of meant to stand on their own. And some wines can be like sippers that you just have on your own. And I certainly drink a fair share of wine just on its own without eating anything with it. But especially European wines are really meant to be paired with food. And they taste completely different with food. And they taste sort of the way that they're supposed to taste. And yeah, Vino Verde is one that really is not, is not supposed to be just consumed. You're supposed to have it on your table with your meal.
Yeah, it makes sense why. I mean, there's so much going on, like flavor wise, that it's helpful to have something to balance it with to get it to speak more, I guess. That's so cool.
So when you taste a new wine, Stacy, do you taste it different ways, like solo and with food and with different foods, or how do you assess the real taste?
Yeah, if I'm a lot of times I don't have a chance to do that because I'm sort of tasting on the fly and I'm at a trade event or we're tasting at work or whatever. But if I'm really assessing something for pairing, it's like if I'm giving someone recommendations on pairing, or if I'm really writing thorough tasting notes for something, I will try it with several different things. Like I'll try it alone and let it sit for a while, and then I'll try it with some like something very basic. I'll try it with something that's a little more flavorful. Try it with something creamy, you know, like a catalog of cheese that I try things with.
Yeah. How do you organize the history of tastings you've done? Do you use an app? Do you use a binder? How do you keep track of all the stuff you've tasted?
Right now I have a tasting journal that is hard copy and I need a different method. There needs to be, well, and I also have I have from my wines at home, I have Cellar Tracker so that I can track the things that I have bottles of and what they taste like. But I'm in the midst of transitioning my system.
Yeah.
I did not realize when I started this and bought like the cute little Wine Folly tasting journal that I would go through that in no time. And yeah, I did not take into account like trade tastings where I'm tasting 50 things in a day.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's like so many different levels to even keep track of within one wine alone, you know. It's like,
Yeah,
it's quite an art. I mean, very impressive.
it's a whole, one of the things that I love about wine is it's so many different things. So it's the experience of the wine itself and the smell and the taste and the appearance and the sort of assessment of quality and all of those things. But it's also history and geography and all the things that went into the wine making and science, and it's also about the gatherings of people who get together around wine and around food and have good conversation, and
Yeah.
all the things that I love in the world, like many geeky things and people.
Yeah. You're talking to, I don't know about your brother, but definitely
People, geeky things,
yeah.
the merging of science and art.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
God.
this is my game here.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Stacy and I, every single Lord of the Rings movie in theaters together, and The Hobbit,
Yes.
and when living like thousands of miles away. So we are ultimate geeks. So
Where do you live?
I live in Minnesota, in Duluth.
Oh.
If you've been to the area or not, but it's right on Lake Superior. So
Very cool.
Yes.
So Stacy, can you share more about like national wines? Like, is there certain regions that you would recommend over others for any level of a wine drinker?
Yeah, I
Tasting
mean,
or traveling too, because Stacy's done a lot of traveling too.
right. So I could talk about both of those things a little bit. So the tasting wise, I think like Napa and Sonoma are kind of they kind of rule the wine industry, and for good reason. I mean, they've been at it longer and the products that they're making are more varied and more refined than most places. Are you still there? You have frozen. They have frozen. Yep, and they're gone.
Yep.
and
as you
they're back.
We got disconnected.
Right, I was like, wait, they froze. I'm talking and I don't think that they are still there. Okay, so wine regions. So I don't know if you've ever been out to Napa and Sonoma, but that is like that's the paragon of the American wine scene, and it is also just really beautiful. And they're doing, I think, the most varied and the most refined wines that are in the US. They're also like Napa has sort of taken the big cab thing, like the big Cabernet thing, and like run with it to the extent that it's kind of boring and overdone. So there's a lot of big name Cabernets that I don't particularly care for because they're overly extracted, they're overripe, they're just trying to do, they're like that, they have too much oak, it's not balanced. So it's just kind of a like that I go back and forth on, but there's some really lovely wine in Sonoma, which I love Sonoma more than Napa probably, and some of the areas of Napa Valley that are a little lesser known. Like I was up on Howell Mountain on my last trip, and that was just gorgeous, and they have amazing wine there. Um, I have not been to Oregon wine country, but I hear really wonderful things, and they make beautiful, beautiful Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. I've been to some of the Michigan wineries. In southern Michigan, I was like really unimpressed. Like really, really unimpressed. They make mostly sweet wines. A lot of them are like fruit wines. It's gross. I don't know that. But northern Michigan, there are some areas near like Sleeping Bear Dunes and stuff that are doing some really great things and just getting better and better, and are starting to get some global attention for their winemaking. Same with like the
City, is that the Traverse City area?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Same with like the Finger Lakes in New York, which when I lived in New York, I went to the Finger Lakes and I was like, this is a lot of sweet Riesling that I don't care about. But they have really made strides toward better quality wines. They're doing like a variety of Riesling, and they're doing some Cabernet Franc, which I love. And they used to make it all sweet, and now they're starting to do dry styles, which I'm a big fan of. Long Island has done some decent wine. I keep hearing good things about Virginia, but when I was out there, it was terrible. So I don't really quite believe it yet, but maybe someday I will get there again. Next week, I will be in Canada, in Ontario wine country. So then I will have things to say about that, because that's another one that I keep hearing about, that they're doing really great things sort of on, because the moderating effects of the lake allow them to grow some things that they wouldn't be able to grow at that latitude normally.
Wow.
So yeah, so I'm kind of excited about that.
What part of Ontario?
I will be in Niagara on the Lake.
Sure.
I would invite you along, but you'll be having a baby.
More cheese.
It was planned poorly. So I'll be out there. That'll be fun. I'm trying to, the things, I mean, there are lots of wineries around here. They're fun to visit and they're pretty, but the wine is not good.
Mhm.
And it is mostly hybrids. So they're here's grape science for you. So the main grape varietal is Vitis vinifera, and that is a European originated grape that has become all these different breeds of grape. That's become all the things that we drink today, and many more. And then Vitis vinifera was hit with phylloxera, which is this little like bug that eats holes in the roots and kills the plants. So Europe's grapes were like wiped out. And they figured out that American grapes were not as good, but American roots were resistant to phylloxera. So they did this fun thing, because grapevines, you can graft them together. So they used the rootstocks from American grapes and the and the branches, the grapes from the Vitis vinifera, and they use that in both places. So European grapes are using American rootstocks, and American grapes are using European varietals.
Hmm.
So, yeah. But anyway, so the grapes that are being grown around here are mostly like native grapes that have been crossed with European grapes. So they're not grafted, they're crossed so that they will still grow in the weather here, which is
Yeah.
not great for grape growing. So we have like Chambourcin and Norton, and which I just don't think are very good. They taste like stems.
Mm.
They taste like unripe stems.
Yeah, interesting.
It's not
So
my.
I went to Nashville, Indiana recently, and there's a winery that we came across and experienced, and Norton was one of their prize winning. I can't remember what else was considered to be a prize winner. There was one, and of course I don't remember the name of the wine at all, but I was pleasantly surprised. But I think the reason why I like this one in particular, because it was like so like big and bold and like tart, and so
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I have a much better understanding of like what to look for in a wine. So I think my tasting experience can be different. But
I think I have become more open since I started studying wine more intensely. I think I've become more open to things just being what they are, and not having to like them, and not that's not really the question that I ask now, is like, do I like this?
Mhm.
That's kind of the last question that I ask now instead of the first question. So now I'm asking a lot more questions about like, why is this the way that it is? What is the place that it comes from that means that this grape is the one that can grow here? What did they do to it in the winery and in the vineyard to make it the way that it is? Is that intentional? Is it a fault? You know, which has made the whole world of wine even more interesting.
yeah, definitely.
Any other questions about the white wines or wine in general? So we're coming down to 8:30. So
Yeah. This is very informative.
I have a question, and I'm sorry.
Ben's hiding over here.
I'm Ben. I'm Elizabeth's husband.
hi.
Hi. This has been awesome. I've just been listening in. Is anybody making new varieties?
Yes, they are. Lots of them actually. So the University of Minnesota, of all places, has a huge grape growing, winemaking facility where they are creating new crossings and hybrids all the time, and trying to figure out what will grow, especially with climate change. So what's going to be able to grow in a variety of climates as we experience drastic climate shifts. So that's one place that's doing a lot of research with that. UC Davis is the other sort of major, like they just have a huge like winemaking program. They're doing all kinds of like both agriculture and winemaking at UC Davis. And so they also have been experimenting with lots of different, how do we cross things? Yeah.
Very cool.
So hybrids, just to be clear, like hybrids are two different species of grape that have been crossed, and crossings are like two different breeds of the same species that are crossed.
Think about that a little bit. Yeah.
Very cool.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, we're hoping to catch you sometime at how do the tastings work at Party Source? Those can we come just on the fly, or always buy a ticket ahead of time, or how does that work?
You can just show up. They're all $10. It's every Wednesday night from 5 to 7. And you can buy in advance if you want to, but you can just show up. Yeah.
Cool.
This was very informative. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. I'm so glad that you did. And I'm going to stop recording now.
We